Hello, I'm Aisha Jenkins, 46 years old, residing in Charleston, South Carolina, a serene, history-rich town in the American South. My world shifted dramatically not long back. Everything shifted on the morning when my husband, Franklin, known to all as Frank, succumbed to a sudden heart attack. The shock came without warning. The local hospital reached out to inform me. He'd died by himself shortly after another getaway to the lakeside cabin. That spot he always kept off limits to me. Over the years, it remained an enigma, a private sanctuary sealed away just for him. I recall ending the call and sinking into quiet stillness, gaze fixed on the ground, as the reality sank in, slowly. Tears didn't come immediately. Instead of sharp grief, a hollow void settled in. Frank wasn't one for warmth or closeness. He thrived on structure, protocols, and uneasy quiet. Our bond had eroded into a chilly pattern marked by distance. I'd grown accustomed to holding back inquiries, withholding views, and steering clear of his path. In the wake of his passing, I wondered if my sorrow was for him or for the pieces of myself I'd surrendered. Sure, I wept during the service, but the deeper emotion stirring within wasn't pure mourning. It resembled bewilderment blended with an intense sense of liberation. Guilt crept in, too. I felt ashamed for not crumbling entirely, for lacking longing toward a partner who'd rendered me unseen for more than 2 decades. Frank was domineering. He'd select my outfits, critique my words, and dictate visits to my siblings. His decisions reigned supreme. I existed as a mere shadow in the meticulously planned existence he directed. Employment never crossed my path. He insisted it wasn't required. His income covered us both. Yet that left me without autonomy, influence, or expression. Whenever I suggested an idea, he'd dismiss it with curt remarks, a veiled disdain peeking through his stiff grin. Gradually, I diminished, and with his departure now, a fresh echo emerged within. Quietude. Not the hush he imposed, but my own suppressed one, bottled up for so long. For the first time, it seemed poised to break free and voice itself. Frank possessed a secluded cottage along a low-country lakefront, not far from Charleston. It came to him through an uncle's bequest long before our paths crossed. Right from the beginning, he established it as his exclusive retreat. Weekends saw him escaping there routinely. He claimed it helped him unwind, involved angling with buddies, served as a solely masculine domain. "It's not your scene," he'd say offhandedly, like it was utterly ordinary. In over 20 years together, he never once extended an invitation. Initially, it stung. Eventually, I resigned to it. I turned into the spouse who lingered at home, ironed his work attire for the week ahead, and posed no probes. Mentioning the property prompted deflections. A subtle nudge toward joining elicited chuckles. In time, that retreat embodied all the secrets he shielded from me. Unbeknownst to me, it also held the potential to unlock facets of my own identity, yet unexplored. From the moment of his death, I sensed I'd venture there someday. Not in his honor, but to claim something for myself. 7 days post-interment, I resolved to sort through his belongings. My goal was to empty cabinets, seal off eras, and cleanse the home of remnants tied to dominance and bygone days. Amid a clear plastic envelope, I uncovered the lake property paperwork. The title, Service Invoices, Upkeep Receipts. It remained solely under his name. No shock there. Clutching those sheets evoked grasping the tangible bonds of my restriction. Suddenly, parting with it via sale appealed strongly. I had no desire to retain mementos of those lonesome weekends, the wordless evening meals on Sundays, or the endless justifications. The dwelling carried excessive baggage of hurt. I intended to deliver the files to the lawyer promptly and initiate the transaction. Yet prior to that, an insistent pull arose to witness it firsthand. Not driven by grim intrigue, but by a necessity to shut that chapter on my terms. Uncertain of discoveries awaiting, I felt prepared to confront them. One early Saturday, I set out solo. I filled a knapsack with hydration, a light bite, a journal, and a weathered key unearthed from the depths of his bureau. Its functionality was a gamble, but I gripped it like a long overdue welcome. The route to the site wound tightly amid soaring pines and enveloping hush. Each kilometer amplified the pressure in my torso. Upon reaching the spot, I halted before the corroded metal barrier and silenced the motor. My pulse raced fiercely. No vehicles were visible, yet an odd vibe lingered. Fresh mail filled the postbox. The lawn appeared newly mowed, and tire tracks suggested regular traffic along the approach. I advanced cautiously, key ready, inhaling deeply. I pondered if I should unlatch the entrance or rap on the eye, hesitated at the threshold, unsure if I even belonged there, yet an inner urge propelled me onward. This property was no longer Frank's domain. It had become a place I could finally enter, and I resolved to step across that boundary. As soon as I passed through the front entrance, I halted abruptly. Garments dangled from the rear porch railing, a container of playthings sat beside the hearth, and the aroma of prepared meals lingered in the atmosphere. This residence didn't appear neglected or sealed away for several days. Far from it. It resembled a bustling, occupied dwelling with its everyday cadence. The surfaces gleamed spotlessly. Upon the eating table rested a bouquet of vibrant blooms, and a tiny bike leaned against the pane near the sill. The entire scene left me profoundly disoriented. My initial suspicion was that intruders had forced their way in and claimed it, though that idea rang false. Nothing indicated intrusion or disorder. Instead, everything spoke of organization, thoughtful touches, vitality. I remained rooted, reluctant to advance. That's when sounds of pacing echoed from the corridor, followed by a gentle female tone murmuring casually. "Frank." Paralysis gripped me. Words failed me. That call wasn't directed my way. In an instant, I realized this dwelling wasn't merely concealing mysteries. It was actively occupied. I rapped lightly on the panel, despite my pulse thundering like it could erupt from my ribcage. Barely 5 seconds elapsed before the entrance creaked ajar, revealing a woman in her late 20s, her midsection prominently rounded by a late-stage pregnancy. Surprise and wariness illuminated her features, as though she couldn't fathom my arrival. Her gaze swept over my visage, attire, and palms, searching for clues. Prior to uttering a sound, she inquired warily, "Who might you be?" Right then, it hit me. My appearance was poised to dismantle something fragile. I stated my identity, then appended steadily yet composedly, "I'm Frank's spouse." Her eyes widened dramatically, her countenance shifting utterly. She retreated a pace and swung the door broader, eyes locked on mine. Without a syllable, she motioned me inside and yielded the path. The home's interior exuded even greater warmth than its exterior suggested, infused with coziness, closeness, and habitual flow, and I navigated it as an outsider would. I lowered myself onto the couch as she eased into an opposing seat, evidently rattled. The lady, introducing herself as Simone Hayes, kept fixating on me, blending bewilderment with anguish. Her fingers quivered faintly atop her abdomen, as if drawing solace against an impending revelation she dreaded. Upon my verification that Frank had passed away just 7 days prior, she clapped a hand over her lips, tears brimming in her eyes. She explained she'd assumed he was off on a work excursion, due back tomorrow. No one had informed her. Absolutely nothing had been communicated. To her, he remained among the living. Tears streamed down silently as she fixated on the ground. I extended a Kleenex from my handbag, and after moments of mutual quiet, she commenced speaking. She admitted their liaison had lasted nearly 4 years. He'd assured her of his bachelor status, citing frequent professional journeys as the reason for his weekend-only appearances. He'd provided for her needs and instilled a sense of security. I absorbed her words mutely, devoid of response. Each phrase landed like a harsh strike, unveiling a concurrent existence, a different partner, a separate household. and I, the unseen partner, struggled for words. I refrained from confronting or faulting her, for her suffering was genuine, untainted, mirroring my own precisely. She had been misled, too, stung by treachery, left in devastation. Meeting my stare, she whispered, nearly timidly, "I had no idea he was wed. I wouldn't have permitted it." I accepted her sincerity. Deceit was absent from her tone. Only sorrow lingered. Rising effortfully, she approached a cabinet in the passage and came back bearing a carton brimming with images. She passed it to me soundlessly. Within lay snapshots of them seaside, dining out, and right there in this abode's lounge, entwined and beaming like an authentic pair. I also discovered anniversary greetings penned by him, personal missives, and modest tokens. Together, they wove a narrative utterly foreign to me. A tightness swelled in my throat, yet tears held back. Shock rendered me immobile. Undeniably, this occasion would divide my existence into eras, pre and post, since every assumption I'd held proved illusory. Simone recounted encountering Frank at a city center cafe during her stint as a server. He'd entered one drizzly evening seeking a brew. She described him as gracious, unable to avert his gaze, and after repeated stops, he'd initiated subtle courtship. In her view, he possessed charisma, polish, and gentleness. He discussed his fabricated role in sales, his perpetual voyages, and the challenges of romance amid such a schedule. Marriage never surfaced, nor did hints of an alternate world awaiting him in the urban core. As Simone continued, I sensed a piece of me shattered quietly inside. Each revelation, every deception Frank had spun so effortlessly, landed like a hidden blow. She admitted they'd started out meeting irregularly just certain weekends, but gradually he suggested turning things official. They picked out furnishings as a pair, refreshed the walls with paint, and dreamed aloud about starting a family. He vowed her a tomorrow kin, security, and she'd trusted it, much like I had back then. Identical promises, identical illusions, 2 lives, one fabrication dragged out over years. Simone pulled a little container from the shelf and revealed its contents to me with tender care. Nestled within lay tiny infant socks, a toy shaker, and a pristine outfit dotted with celestial patterns. She'd shared the purchase with him merely 7 days prior, from a shop in the city center. He brimmed with enthusiasm. He chatted about their child as though nothing else mattered in his world. He'd sworn to claim the newborn on official papers, scout a bigger home, and hinted at tying the knot. It rang so reliable, so meticulously outlined, that it sent shivers through me. He'd orchestrated the identical routine with me once. Gazing at her, I spotted echoes of my own history in her eyes, expectant with child, brimming with anticipation, oblivious to how the fellow who'd pledged me the stars was secretly forging a nightmare out of sight. Simone was fractured, though the depth of it hadn't fully dawned on her. She had yet to grasp that her narrative was just as illusory, that he'd merely dusted off the old playbook for fresh players. I held my tongue. I merely compressed my mouth, stared at the ground, and forced down the lump, since at my core, I carried blame too, for ignoring the signs, for staying mute all that time, for delaying my exit. Simone powered up her mobile and displayed Frank's latest texts to me. They overflowed with warmth and fondness, debating infant monikers and itineraries for his return from the work excursion. The final message dated back just 3 days prior to his passing. "Missing you two," it said, paired with a love symbol. She dissolved into sobs, reciting it out loud, as if clinging to some slim chance of clarity, a resolution, anything to render this shattering truth before her coherent. I allowed her tears to flow. I had no solace to extend. Next, she revealed scribbled memos, cinema stubs, a modest scrapbook capturing their moments together. All that Frank had dismissed as non-existent in our final stretch, he'd carefully assembled alongside her. I even uncovered a half-completed missive where he declared his existence had found purpose only after encountering her. A storm of fury and hollowness washed over me. I wavered between weeping and raging, yet did neither. I simply perched there, eyeing the fragments of his alternate existence as my inner world gradually disintegrated. I stayed wordless as Simone sobbed nearby, gripping her device like a lifeline to summon him anew. I lacked the words to ease her. I'd endured my own endless nights of tears over him, though for separate wounds. The deepest sting for me wasn't the infidelity itself, but the decades spent beside a stranger who never unveiled his authentic self. It seemed my existence had been an artfully erected illusion, where I merely fulfilled the part he'd scripted, and now I learned I hadn't been the sole performer in his drama. We formed a duo of women ensnared by the identical protagonist. Not a drop escaped my eyes right then. I felt hollowed out, as if no fracture-prone fragments lingered within. I'd wept volumes in quiet during the union, leaving only a shell toughened by routine. Listening to Simone softly relive her recollections ripped through me, for so many phrases echoed from my memory. I'd caught them, too, ages past, delivered in that very cadence. It mirrored my yesteryears in her now, twin tales etched in the pigment of falsehood. Once she'd settled, she met my gaze with eyes still glistening and murmured, "I had no clue he was wed." I promise, had I realized, I'd have steered clear. Her tone quivered, yet her expression held no remorse, only stunned incredulity. She qualified as another casualty, viewed from an alternate vantage. She expressed regret to me, as though her unawareness equated to disloyalty. I inclined my head without a sound. No pardon was required. Blame evaded us both. Solely Frank had spun this tangle. Simone echoed the sentiment endlessly. I had no idea. An urge rose to embrace her, despite the tangle of sentiment still dividing us. Resentment evaded her in my heart. Truth be told, I comprehended her more deeply than I'd care to own. Our overlap surpassed my wildest thoughts. We'd each cherish the same individual, convinced he belonged to us alone, blind to our joint stake in his fabrications. It stirred a sharp yet oddly freeing awareness. For the initial instant, my anguish shed its isolation. We lingered for hours in dialogue, voices low without overlap, permitting phrases to emerge at their own pace. We absorbed one another's tales as though we'd craved this bond for ages, unbeknownst. No hunt for blame passed between us, merely quests for clarity, shards of honesty to mend the voids of the betrayal lingered heavily. Simone confided in me about her anxieties, explaining how lost she felt now that her world had crumbled. I shared my own decades of quiet endurance, the sense that I'd never really embraced life fully. Our exchange was raw and difficult, yet essential. As I rose to depart, she accompanied me to the entrance. We held each other's gaze wordlessly for a moment, and then, spontaneously, we embraced. It felt clumsy and fleeting, but genuine all the same. Two lives shattered by the same deceitful man discovering solace in their mutual reality. I drove away with a constricted heart and my mind swirling with reflections. Uncertainty clouded my future plans, but one truth stood firm. I refused to carry the burdens of an imposed existence any longer. The moment had arrived to author my own path. On the journey home, Simone stayed fixed in my thoughts, her anguished expression, her vulnerable frame shielding the offspring of a man who'd misled us both. She faced solitude, expecting a child, stripped of support, far from any kin. Though I knew little of her background, a deep urge stirred within me. I couldn't simply ignore her plight and act as if she were invisible. Frank had orchestrated this mess, not her. Despite the ache it caused, a sense of moral duty emerged, not toward him, but to her and the innocent life she carried. Sleep eluded me that evening. I rose repeatedly, staring at the shadows above, rummaging through forgotten storage for any source of solace. None appeared, Instead, a fresh perspective emerged. I couldn't remain passive as another suffered the fallout from a falsehood she hadn't devised. Assisting her, I realized, would mark the start of my own healing, no longer defined as the deceived spouse, but as a liberated individual empowered to choose boldly, without dread or approval. For the first time, I was tuning into my inner voice. That next weekend, I gathered supplies, infant outfits saved from my niece, staple pantry items, and a few novels I imagined she'd enjoy. Whether Simone would welcome me or grasp my intent remained unclear, but an inner drive compelled my return. I needed her to realize isolation wasn't her fate, that not every connection in her world need end in desertion. Pulling up to the lakeside retreat, I exited the vehicle deliberately and rapped on the entrance, bracing for the unknown. She hesitated before answering. Spotting me, her eyes flared with astonishment, as though my presence defied belief. I offered a serene smile and displayed the parcels. Words weren't needed from either side. Our silent stare lingered until she moved to allow entry. She greeted me amid bewilderment and appreciation. The place showed signs of tidiness since my prior visit, though her demeanor still betrayed a profound disorientation. I placed the items on the counter and assured her no choices were required right then. My purpose was simply companionship, so I lingered. Over the midday meal, dialogue was sparse, but the air had softened, shedding some of its strain. She inquired about my background, the nature of my union, and I responded plainly, without adornment. I described adapting to silence as a shield against discord, how isolation had shadowed my days. Simone absorbed it all with the quiet empathy born of shared suffering. In turn, I wondered if she'd pondered her post-delivery options. Her gaze dropped. She shook her head, admitting exhaustion at the prospect of planning ahead. That's when I suggested aiding her in securing a modest flat in Charleston, close to where I lived. I emphasized it came without strings, no reciprocity demanded, driven by my empathy for her terror and confusion. Initially, words failed her. She fixed on me, expression stunned, like I'd switched tongues. Softly, she murmured, "What makes you want to help me like this?" My answer was straightforward. The fault isn't yours. I've stood in your shoes, and no one extended a hand when I was at my lowest. Within 7 days, I located a compact yet inviting one-room unit in a serene Charleston enclave. No extravagance, but fully equipped. A sunlit area, efficient cooking space, and unpretentious facilities. I outfitted it minimally, prioritizing ease for Simone and the newborn. Light drapes, a plush mat, and in the sleeping nook, a cradle stocked with disposables, linens, plus a plush toy evoking optimism. Phoning to announce its readiness, she paused at length. Finally, her tone breaking, she whispered, "I can't express my gratitude enough." I assisted her relocation using my vehicle, a brief haul brimming with feeling. She gazed outward mutely, gripping a satchel like a treasured lifeline. Stepping inside the new space, she explored silently. Moments later, she faced me, eyes brimming, and pulled me into an embrace. It was a genuine embrace, the kind that spoke for itself without words. Right then, I realized we'd stumbled into a fresh chapter, unplanned and real. Not some contrived alliance, but a sincere alliance forged by two scarred souls choosing to speak up at last. Before long, the initial venomous remark landed. It was from Brenda, Frank's sibling, who rang me up one afternoon solely to express her disgust. "You're tarnishing your husband's legacy," she hissed in an icy tone, treating me like a betrayer. She rambled on about kin, about the gossip, about the scandal of bonding with the interloper. It didn't shock me. Brenda had always prioritized facades over honesty. I shot back with a curt, "Handle it however you must," and ended the call, free of remorse. This round, I refused to defend my choices. For too many years, I'd zipped my lips to keep the harmony, dodge awkwardness, spare others trouble. Yet now I saw that muteness had only eroded me from within. I owed no accounts to those who'd never grasped my ordeals. Simone wasn't my foe, my competitor, or my retribution. She stemmed from a deception I'd unwittingly shared. Aiding her wasn't defiance, it was shattering the pattern. And if that irked folks, they'd just have to adapt, much like I'd adapted to their verdicts. Once Simone was settled, I resolved to offload the lakeside cabin. I had zero desire to return there. That spot brimmed with hidden truths, deceptions, and oppressions that weighed me down. Emotionally, it was no longer mine. Paperwork be damned. I reached out to an agent, surrendered the keys, and inked the papers without a backward glance. It felt like sealing shut, a portal to years of unseen agony. And in doing so, I could at last draw a full breath. I held off sharing with Simone until the deal closed. I didn't want her assuming it was on her account or tied to my revelations. This move was mine alone, a release from that load. When I finally shared, she gazed at me quietly and murmured, "You've shown more courage than you realize." I had no ready reply, but those words lingered. After ages, I sensed no longing or rage, just an odd serenity, like reclaiming a fragment of myself I'd presumed gone forever. Gradually, Simone and I wove a connection transcending our shared origins. We weren't in constant touch, but we showed up for one another in pivotal moments. I joined her for multiple scans, sorted her coverage forms, and tagged along to collect a bassinet donated by a local. She never demanded support, yet received it with that blend of thanks and embarrassment I recognized all too well. Witnessing her so youthful and shattered stung, not from compassion alone, but from deep resonance. I'd built tougher armor over time. She hadn't. One afternoon, I spotted her in tears at her doorway, overwhelmed by the heft of her shopping haul. Without pause, I snatched her keys and hauled it all upstairs in silence. That act pried open a fissure between us. From that point, our tie evolved from sporadic aid to authentic solidarity. She'd confide her anxieties, and I'd get them instantly, no elaboration required. We shifted to easy chats, sans pretense, as if fate had linked us not merely via suffering, but for renewal. The morning labor hit, she dialed me at 6 around, contraction steady and no one else to call. I threw on clothes, seized the prepped duffel from weeks back, and rushed her to the medical center, palms clammy with anxiety. Through the ordeal, I remained at her side, inhaling in sync, gripping her fingers, soothing her amid terror's grip. I saw her shatter under agony, then rally with resolve. When the infant emerged at last, an unforeseen warmth washed over me, as though he belonged to my world too. Simone wept from joy, and I pulled her close, chest tight with feeling. The child was stunning, serene, eyes alert to knowing, like he sensed the full tale. She urged me to cradle him, and in that hold, attention uncoiled within. He wasn't blood kin, yet this little one marked a fresh slate. Untainted, he embodied the close of deceit and the dawn of another narrative. There, I knew Frank's hold on me had vanished. His true inheritance wasn't the hurt, it was the existence I'd nurtured into being. Weeks on, I dove into counseling, not from believing I was broken, but to probe why I'd tolerated so much for so long. Every meeting peeled back a locked compartment in my core. I exposed scars I'd accepted as normal, concessions I'd masked as wisdom, and quietudes I'd misconstrued. It took real courage to confront everything, but deep down, I knew it was essential if I truly aimed to reconstruct my life. For once, I had no desire to revert to my old self. Instead, I longed to embrace authenticity. No pretenses, no anxieties, no lingering shame. I started jotting down in a journal thoughts I'd always kept buried inside. Memories I'd buried resurfaced, along with painful glances and phrases that continued to burden me. Some evenings brought tears, yet they stemmed from liberation rather than sorrow. The process of mending was painful, but in a purifying way, free from self-blame. The hold of history weakened its grip on me. I was gradually mastering the art of releasing it, not erasing it entirely, but refusing to let it shape my identity. Eventually, My counselor suggested joining a women's circle that gathered every Thursday afternoon in the city's community hall. I wavered before attending. It seemed alien, like it wasn't meant for someone like me. Yet a spark of intrigue won out, leading me through the doors into a space brimming with women from diverse backgrounds, each carrying their own inner fractures. We exchanged tales, pauses, sobs, and above all, empathy. Judgment was absent, interruptions non-existent, and no one vied to claim the deepest scar. After years of disconnection, a profound sense of inclusion washed over me. I shared tentatively at first, in brief phrases, carefully choosing each term. Initially, I worried that my experiences might baffle them, but quickly I realized several had endured comparable or even harsher ordeals. I wasn't irrational, exaggerated, or fragile. I was simply a woman who'd endured as well as possible amid circumstances that stifled her growth. Those weekly sessions turned into my refuge. I emerged feeling unburdened, empowered, and more focused. Slowly, I pieced myself together anew, grounded in honesty. One such afternoon, following a session, I settled on a nearby seat with a takeaway coffee in hand. Exhausted yet peaceful, I savored the quiet. That's when Thomas Miller, with his steady tone and composed eyes, who was also departing the hall, came over. He inquired if he might join me, and we conversed lightly about the climate, literature, and the challenges of fresh starts. He shared that he'd been widowed for 3 years, was attending counseling himself, and often battled insomnia. There was no romantic undertone, merely genuine connection. Over subsequent weeks, our paths crossed repeatedly at that bench. On occasion, we'd converse. Other times, we'd simply coexist in quiet. He never sought my contact details, offered vows, or pushed boundaries. His tranquil presence gradually eased my defenses. I wasn't seeking romance, but I wasn't shutting it out completely. Beside him, I felt no pressure to defend or rationalize my history. He heard me out with courtesy, without attempting to mend me or critique my background. For me, that simple attentiveness was a form of affection, one that lightened rather than burdened. Through Tom, I came to see that true connection needn't involve pain, that a soft gesture could mend more deeply than countless hollow assurances, and that consistent dignity outshone flashy commitments. He never aimed to rescue me, supplant my losses, or claim unearned territory. He just remained steady, affectionate, undemanding in his essence. He stood by me amid uncertainties, gently urging faith without demands. Bit by bit, I chose to let him into my life, not from desperation, but willingly. No dramatic sparks or bold displays marked our bond, but meaningful glances conveyed volumes, lattes shared, and peaceful strolls through the green spaces. This was companionship that didn't aim to patch voids, but to journey parallel. For the first time, merging with another didn't spark fear of vanishing. I continued my sessions faithfully. I persisted in my self-construction. Yet now, it unfolded with company. Tom showed me that yesterday's shadows don't dictate my worth, and that serenity can follow turmoil, not as a sedative, but as a welcoming hold. That was an unfamiliar revelation. When Tom suggested we wed, it wasn't dramatic, down on one knee with rehearsed lines. It happened on an ordinary day as we cleared fallen leaves from the lawn. With warm eyes, he said, "We could turn this into something lasting, if that's what you wish." I didn't respond right away. A quiet smile sufficed, as I'd sensed it already. We planned a modest event in a cozy garden patio, encircled by a handful of key guests. No blaring tunes or lavish attire, just sincerity, pale blooms, and a quiet vow to nurture without wounding. Simone and her little boy attended, positioned up front as threads in my evolving narrative. Seeing her cradling the infant stirred a sense of completion. This child, conceived in deception, now thrived amid care, honor, and authentic involvement. At the ceremony's close, Tom clasped Simone's hand and expressed gratitude for her support. I observed quietly, touched, recognizing that not every man mirrored Frank. That union wasn't a storybook close. It marked a deliberate launch, unshadowed by specters, unmasked. Love Diet didn't mend my injuries, but it kept me from facing the blood alone, and that meant the world to me back then. Over the years, we welcomed 2 additional kids into our family, a fierce-spirited daughter and a gentle, perceptive son. Seeing them thrive in a home where affection flowed freely, untouched by intimidation, stands as my proudest achievement. I never chased flawlessness. All I wanted was serenity, equilibrium, and honesty. Simone stayed woven into our daily world. She settled mere blocks from us, and we'd cross paths regularly. Our little ones romped together, building ties as tight as siblings, even without matching last names. Stronger, in fact, than mere family bloodlines. The perpetual dread of having to appease or defend every choice had faded from my existence. I'd mastered the art of deciding fearlessly. Occasionally, as I watched them dash across the den or erupt in joyous peals outside, I'd reflect on the steep price I'd paid to reach this point. The path hadn't been smooth, swift, or free of agony, yet it belonged to me entirely. Each stride, awkward as some were, pulled me distant from an existence thrust upon me and nearer to one I'd claimed for myself. Gone was the version of me who hushed her voice to dodge conflict. In her place stood a mom, a companion, a confidant, the architect of her narrative. Scars lingered on me, sure, but shame no longer shadowed them. They traced the terrain of all I'd endured. On still evenings, my thoughts drift to Frank, not laced with resentment or longing, but viewed through an icy detachment that no longer stings. He shaped a chapter of my days. That's true, but he doesn't own the book. His deceptions targeted me. Us, scattering hurt that lingered for ages to fade. Yet unknowingly, he propelled me into a liberty I'd scarcely dreamed of. Absolving him wasn't about excusing his actions. It was about releasing the burdens I refused to haul any longer. That became my method of escaping his lingering gloom and stepping into my radiant path. These days, I grasp what it means to breathe easy, unmasked, unbound by the urge to squeeze into another's blueprint. Our home carries the aroma of warm loaves from the oven, scattered volumes, and genuine chuckles. I require no lavish luxuries to feel complete. Tranquility suffices. Seeking nods from others has ceased, for I've come to see my true self reflected back. This is who I am, Aisha, once faded into obscurity for so long, now glowing boldly on her terms. If this odyssey taught me one truth, it's that existence holds value, even when it aches initially, even when it demands sacrifice, even when rebuilding from scratch. Enjoyed hearing my tale. What's the city tuning in from? Drop by in the comments for a chat. If the narrative resonated, consider a super thanks to fuel more tales like it. Grateful beyond words for your kind backing, eagerly awaiting your thoughts below. Check the display for 2 fresh personal accounts I truly endorse. My channel brims with even more. Hit subscribe if you haven't. Catch you for the upcoming saga. Warmest regards and appreciation.